Could I please check everybody's able to, know we can hear in the room because I can hear myself. Can you hear me online? Presuming so. Okay, thank you. The agenda pack with the papers is available via ModGov or directly from the council website from the link which was sent out to members. A supplementary agenda pack is in respect of the minutes from the previous meeting, was published on Monday the 22nd of July. When I invite someone to speak, could you clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody who is listening to the meeting so they can identify who is speaking and ensure that you use the microphones when you are in the room. I see quite a lot of people online this morning. Can I also warmly welcome any members of the public and media who are joining us today? This meeting is being recorded by the council. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. In respect of housekeeping, there is no expected fire alarm, but should this happen, please follow the Democratic Service colleagues and they will hopefully lead the way out to the car park at the rear of the building. Okay, moving on. Apologies for absence, please. I have Councillor Benty Height and Councillor Matt Martin, who's being replaced by Simon. Welcome, Simon Coles. I believe Mike's in this morning. Councillor Rigby is in for Councillor Boyden. Any others? Oh, Tom Power. Hello, Tom. Do come in.
Thanks, Chair. I did send my apologies to Jamie, but I've just had an email saying he's actually on annual leave. But I am in the meeting just online. Okay, thank you.
So you're actually on annual leave somewhere in the Alps or something, are you?
No, I'm not on annual leave. No, I sent an email to Jamie. He's on annual leave, but I don't think it's got registered. On my apologies, but I am in the meeting.
Thank you very much. Declarations of interests other than the usual twin hatters? No. Okay, thank you. Meetings from the previous minutes from the previous meeting to approve the minutes from the previous meeting held on the 6th of June as a correct record. If you've got them in front of you. Thank you. Let's go through a page at a time. Oh, I haven't got page numbers, but we can assume page 1 is the cover. Page 2, 3, 4, and 5. All right, I'll accept those and Steph, I'll sign them afterwards. Thank you. Public question time, there's no registered. No sound. Please correct somebody's Councillor Ashley Richards is saying. No sound. Well, Tom heard us, so.
Yeah, sound is okay.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. Councillor Richards should log out, did you say? Yeah, if you can't hear us, please log out and log back in again. Thank you. He won't hear us say that, so what have I said that for? Yeah, technophobe, sorry. No public questions. Agenda item 5, work programme. We've got Jenny Murphy here this morning to present the forward plan and outcome tracker, and you can ask questions afterwards. So, Jenny, thank you.
So if you've got any questions on the forward tracker, would you like to let me know? Yes, and I'll feed them on to Jamie. Thank you.
Councillor Dave Mansell.
Okay, thank you. All right, so on the outcome tracker on page 11, we've got the energy task and finish group recommendations. This was mentioned last time. One, a very minor thing, but I think it would be helpful if the recommendations from the task and finish group and from the committee could actually be put in the outcome tracker. I think we just help everybody all round, us and the officers, because they're just they're just sort of referred to at the moment rather than shown. More importantly, I think we need to be progressing this, or at least see that it's being progressed. So we took that report, I think it was back in March. So one thing that would be expected to follow is that it would go on to the executive forward plan. And it's, as far as I can see, not yet on the executive forward plan. So the energy plan should be going there, and our reports. Also importantly is the recommendations regarding this committee itself and what we were going to do next on it. And one important one, which we've actually come back to several times on this and other reports as well, is progress on the local plan. We've got some suggestions we're wishing to put into the local plan, and we're wishing to see whether that can be done, what progress is happening. I feel that's getting urgent. I mean, I don't know, how the progress on the local plan is going, but it's underway, it's happening, and we would like some input to it. And I think that means we need to have officers here, and really we've given them quite a lot to go on already. I hope they could even give us a report, and indeed we've asked for that. So I hope that can go onto our forward plan and be taken relatively soon. There were two other aspects again for our forward plan from the recommendations from the group. We were interested in looking at the grid constraints and the role of community groups. I would suggest that might even warrant a whole future meeting at some point. So again, we should be considering this in the forward plan. My suggestion would be it might sort of proceed along similar lines to the water quality one, whereby we can make some suggestions for people to come along, clearly outside of the council, to present to us, and we can hear what they've got to say and come to any conclusions after that. And then there was 4.5D of our recommendations relevant to our group here, and that applied to economic development and the role, that contribution that could have to energy development in Somerset. Now, we have got a number of economic development reports coming on the forward plan, so I think the best thing there is if that could just be drawn attention to the officers, that if they were able to slip something relevant into one of those reports, that would be really good. So that covers that. I've probably got more on the forward plan, but are we just sort of on the outcome tracker for the moment?
Right, I think Mickey's going to handle that one, are you?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really helpful suggestion. It is hard to track all the recommendations. So I think including them there is a good suggestion. So I'll feed that back to Jamie. And yeah, noted all of those points in terms of requests for items on our forward plan. So we'll take that into a discussion and agree it with the chair and vice chair as we usually do. But they're all helpful suggestions. So Mansell, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I'm going around the room. So Simon now. Okay, well, then Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mine is again on outcomes. We still haven't finished setting up this task and finish group. And I would like, if we could, Mr. Chairman, try and get that done today if there's any time. The second thing, this is on water quality, is that on Tuesday morning, for those who didn't hear it, Tony Juniper, the head of Natural England, announced that they were going to reverse the complete nutrient neutrality scheme as it wasn't working. We don't know any more about that reversal or what he's going to change. So we will have to wait a bit before we can answer the question on those. I was going to hold a conference on this very subject tomorrow. I've had to cancel it because Natural England pulled the rug on me. And they sent an email to a senior member of Wessex Water asking why Wessex Water were attending when they'd already said they weren't going to, and why Wessex Water were sponsoring it against Natural England's advice. I feel that it is slightly sad that they felt unable to take part in looking at what the problems on the levels were and needed to actually try and control and sort out that actual meeting. It will be held again, I hope, in October.
Thank you, Henry. In terms of the work plan, can somebody update me on how many volunteers we got for that working group? What? You got one? Okay. Right. In which case, I think, as under any other business, I'll bring that one up, because irrespective of the remit, we need to have members. So if we don't get any members, we're stuck. And if I come back at Dave, that one on the local plan, yeah, I think that's a very important issue personally. Just feel free to remind me about 2 weeks before the next meeting, just in case it doesn't come up. Thank you. Simon, did you want to come in now?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, it was just to follow on from comments that Henry made. Yesterday, there was a Planning South meeting, and it was really interesting that Natural England permitted some development, which is an absolute reversal from where they've been for the last 10 months. So I just raised that because it appears that we are having distinct changes from Natural England in how they are treating nutrient neutrality. So it's just to follow up from because this is
That's great. Thank you for that. And both those comments, we don't want to get sidetracked on this issue any further in this meeting. There will be an opportunity to do that, but I think Mickey wants to come back.
Just to clarify, there is no official change in government policy at the moment, despite Tony Juniper's comments on the radio the other day. We have discussed this with MHCLG and Natural England themselves. Clearly, we are all expecting some movement from a new government, and I expect the leader will be following up on his question to the Deputy Prime Minister to lobby for what we think those changes in policy should be. But there is no change at the moment.
And I do see this issue for something for the working group. Councillor Mike Stanton's online.
Thank you, Chair. I've raised this with you and Jamie, but just to put it on the record and so the whole committee understands, your committee is now the scrutiny committee in effect for the Somerset Rivers Authority. There used to be a joint scrutiny committee of the predecessor districts and county council, which died on the 1st of April last year. So the point I've made outside the meeting is that ought to be in the forward plan. I think the intention was to do a review at one of these meetings once a year and to do a paper written review once a year. Thanks.
Thank you, Mike. Kirsty, would you like to come back on that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's just to confirm that I did liaise with the committee administrator, and we did agree that it would be on the forward plan for November. Unfortunately, I hadn't noticed, I did read the paper, but I hadn't noticed it hadn't made it into this edition of the forward plan. But we have suggested that the Somerset Rivers Authority comes to the November scrutiny committee, if that's okay, Chair.
I'm happy with that, fine. Dave.
Thanks. Two more suggestions for the forward plan. I will just mention, hopefully there will be members who come forward for the water quality task and finish. I'm kind of looking elsewhere. If we're stuck, I might have my arm twisted. But probably the main comment is presumably it can be opened up to any other members. It doesn't have to just be scrutiny members from this committee on it. So it could be others, and clearly those close to the Somerset levels and moors might be expected to have a particular interest in it, although of course all of us in the catchment have interest and are affected. But that's just suggestions on those, but particularly opening it up to beyond the committee. Two suggestions for further suggestions for the forward plan. I noticed on the executive forward plan, item number 60, there's due to be a report to their September meeting on delegation of highways maintenance to city, town, parish councils for volunteer workers. That sounds worthy of scrutiny to me. I'm wondering what that might entail, and tend to think, depending on what it says, that could go down like a lead balloon in my patch. So I think I would like that to come to scrutiny, really, and items should come to scrutiny before they go to executive. There's there's little point in coming to scrutiny after executive. Our next meeting September, so I hope there is some way that could be arranged. The second one was. And one again which we've raised before in relation to broadband, and we've got an information paper deferred later on it, which is still the same as last time. It strikes me this is a matter of some importance and urgency, possibly to the wider Somerset area, but I'm aware particularly for the West area, because the last we heard, the airband contract was at big risk of default. Certainly it hasn't been progressed as far as the rollout of broadband to the rural areas in the west of Somerset. Now, I think this is the right place to bring it forward. For that reason, I think we probably need more than an information sheet, unless there's suddenly some good news emerges and it's all sorted out, but that's not apparent at the moment. I think probably at the least we need an information briefing for members from Connecting Devon and Somerset, and it may be more than just the West area. That's the area I'm aware of. So there may be problems in the other areas too. So some sort of briefing for members from Connecting Devon and Somerset, so we can understand what's going on with the rollout of broadband. I hope that could be before our next meeting, with the opportunity that if we did have comments or recommendations we wish to make as a result, as I believe we're also responsible for the scrutiny of Connecting Devon and Somerset, that we could make them at our next meeting. If a briefing wasn't the way forward, I think we need this as an agenda item, and we need Connecting Devon and Somerset here to answer what's going on with the West area contract with airband, and what's going to happen about the broadband rollout. Thank you.
Okay, Dave, there's a lot there, and all I'm going to say, I'm going to perhaps bring Mickey in on this, can I? But before I do, just say that obviously the amount of things that we can discuss in the short term is getting more and more pressurized. So some of these requests that might want to come up at the next meeting or the meeting after that might have to wait a little bit longer, because the remit of this committee is vast. But before I make excuses, I'll hand over to Mickey to see what he has to say.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the reason we've provided that update note is because we know what an issue of concern it is. It is a complex legal situation, so it's challenging to know what the right point to do that. But what I'll commit to is taking that away, discussing it with Paul Hickson and colleagues, to work out what we can do at the appropriate point and update the committee.
Did anybody want to come back about Richard, you didn't want to come back about the highways issue that Dave mentioned, did you? Was it volunteers or something? It sort of, must admit, I glossed over that when I read it. And I'm sorry to put you on the spot. You don't have to.
Sure. So I'm just going from the executive forward plan, which is something we're referred to on our own agenda. There's a link to it. Item 60 on the executive forward plan, and I think these are the words, word for word, more or less. All the important ones are there. Delegation of highways maintenance to city, town, parish councils for volunteer workers. That's the item you're due to be taking in September. So that sounds a bit concerning, wondering what it means. I think it would be worthy of scrutiny before it goes to executive.
Mike is there if you want to defer to Mike on that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll defer to Mike. It might be easy. He can explain it probably in better detail. But obviously, we've got various options coming to town and parish councils. I'll hand over to Mike.
Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Yes, morning, everybody. I must appreciate I haven't looked at that item myself, so I think probably the best thing is I take it away and understand what the intention was of having it on the executive forward plan. I'm not personally aware that we're taking anything that is significant enough to warrant executive approval at this stage. We're obviously progressing a programme of enabling localities to deliver works on the highway as an enhanced service. But let me just take it away, and perhaps I come back to Councillor Mansell in the committee with a short explanation of why that's on the agenda and what we're hoping to achieve from it.
Yeah, very happy with that. Thanks, Mike.
Okay, apologies for that.
Any more questions? Okay, Marcus. Councillor Cravers.
That one's working. Thank you, Chair. It was actually, I mean, Councillor Mansell dealt with the connecting Devon and Somerset, and I heard the answer there. But it is something that I'm hearing increasingly pointing. Oh, that one's on. Can you hear me? Yeah. The button. That's right. Anyway, now I've lost it. There we go. And it is something I'm hearing increasingly in the west of the country. And thank you, Councillor Dave Mansell, for talking about the west. And it's dragged on, and I know there's probably funding in a budget somewhere that's sat there not doing anything, and it seems a travesty that that funding sat there not doing anything. So the sooner we can get and deal with this issue, the better. And if it takes this committee to do it, then please so. Thank you.
Thank you. No further comments on that agenda item. Thank you. A lot of constructive stuff there, and I'm sure we'll all try to accommodate as much as we can, as quickly as we can, in terms of those suggestions. Moving on to agenda item 6, equality due regard. I've got Tom Rutlands here, Public Health Promotion Manager, to present the report to members, after which you can ask questions. Morning, Tom. For those at home, the microphones aren't working at all well this morning. Excuse me.
We have life, it's fine. That'll be why then. It's an efficiency saving. Right, good morning all. This is hopefully should be a fairly swift paper. Essentially, those hopefully that are around the room should be aware that in October of last year, we had a local government peer challenge around the equality framework for local government that essentially looked at how we functioned as an organisation in relation to equality and diversity and where we may want to improve and be more rigorous in our implementation of the equality legislation. As part of that, there was a finding around how our committees, am I double dipping? Or not at all? That's good. I'll carry on.
Carry on.
So to look at how our committees were effectively implementing the public sector equality duty around having due regard to the 3 elements, which are around eliminating discrimination and harassment, fostering good relations between those that share a protected characteristic and those that don't, and creating equality of opportunity. And those considerations are supposed to run through everything that we do as an organisation and should be embedded as a core rock of kind of core in the middle of what we do and how we function. So what we're doing is we're going around to each committee to say, just a gentle reminder that this should be part of the consideration that you have as a committee. A scrutiny as much as any to go, actually, Are we functioning effectively as an organisation? Have we had the considerations that we should have from an equality perspective? And are they informing the process that we're going through? So our logic is, from a scrutiny perspective, that's around how we challenge those decisions and those processes that are coming forward, how we have a worthwhile conversation around whether or not they're being done in the right way and are affecting people differently and how we go about doing it. So for your scrutiny, it will be things around kind of transport, trading standards, and how that feeds into different outcomes for individuals or improving outcomes for individuals through what we're doing. The impacts of highways works, the impacts of changes to how we deliver waste and whether or not that could disproportionately impact different groups. So there will always be a consideration of due regard. It won't necessarily be for every decision that is coming through. So minerals and waste will come through you guys, I presume, at some point. I have read that. It was scintillating, but from a quality perspective, there was nought. So there will sometimes be nothing that is appropriate, and that is absolutely fine, but there should be a consideration. So there should have been a consideration from officers before it gets to you to go, is there, do I need to inform you of the consideration and thought process that we've had? For you to then be able to understand that as part of the decision, as part of the challenge, as part of the recommendations that you put forward, for the decision then to be taken at that point. So this is just a gentle reminder that this is part of your requirement as a scrutiny, as it will be for every other scrutiny and every other kind of committee that we have as an organisation, and any questions or queries that you may have around that. What we will do is provide a further kind of training package. We're not going to do it as an actual training session because that fell very badly for previous sessions that we'll do. What we'll do is create a briefing sheet that will be able to be there to support committees around the considerations that they might have specifically for theirs. I shall now be quiet if there's any questions.
Any questions? I've got one. Is it right that this committee is sitting with the exception of the executive member, without a woman on it?
So I will say it is right in as much as there is a selection of individuals, and that selection process, if it is true and right, should be there to be able to make sure that the right people are in the room for the work that is there and the decisions that need to be taken. From my perspective, there will always be a consideration as to whether the voices in the room are the right voices to be able to have a rounded conversation and decision about where we're going. So I think for me, there's always a bit of a understanding of the individuals within that space, of the challenges that communities may face and the impact that may have on the decisions that they take forward.
Thank you. Dixie wanted to come back on that one.
Thank you. Really interesting question, Martin. I just want to kind of make clear that I'm not a scrutiny committee member, and we do have, I think, Bente and Saria. Saria's online, Bente's on leave, so that there's a sort of an issue about who's in the room and who's on the committee. I would say that the committee is still quite male dominated though, and that might be something to consider. Thanks.
Thank you. Of course, I was, for benefit of others, I'm aware that you're not officially on the committee, but I didn't want to exclude you from the generalisation that I made. Marcus, did you put your hand up?
It's actually following up from that, actually, because I mean, it's actually, and it's probably something more. I mean, it boils down to how the electoral system and the party function works. We look around the room, and not only are we all male, but we're all white, and we're, with the exception of one, and dare say it, middle-aged. It's nothing more of a. It's nothing more of a. I mean, I have to say. I mean, it's just we sit on these. I mean, I don't know how long Simon's been doing it a long time. Those have been doing it a long time. You think you wouldn't be the youngest in the room anymore, would you? I mean, it's just truly something that needs sorting out, and I don't know how we sort it out. And it shows the disconnect. And I think what's happened in the general election, disconnect to young people voting despite everybody's best attempts to. Where's the next generation of councillors coming from? And and then the quality of those councillors, because you only have, and where that comes from. I've got one question on the actual paper, and the sooner that you talk about training session, because I must admit I'm there going, well, maybe I missed a members briefing or training session. But definition, eliminate discrimination. Fair enough, I understand that. And then you got the definition of harassment and how that works, and is that as a council function? Because there's sometimes you get emails from officers in this council, and I'd almost argue they were harassment sometimes, as a customer. So how do we deal with that as a council?
Oh, sorry, I didn't catch the last sentence. Sorry.
The question is how we define harassment, because sometimes you can be dealing with departments and all sorts of organisations, and sometimes the replies you get, I mean, I don't know whether they're AI generated, but they can almost be seen as harassment sometimes, and how we deal with that, because as customers, we've got lots of vulnerable customers out there as a council, and we're all probably quite thick-skinned. You have to be in this game, but a lot of members of the public aren't, and they get an email from the council and they sort of panic, don't know how to deal with it. They might not be used to it. They may be dealing with just mobile phones and might not have a laptop and a desktop and everything else, and trying to reply on a mobile phone and read an email. How we deal with that and how sensitive this council is to that. Thank you.
Come back on that, Tom.
Yes, absolutely. I'm going to do a short answer. There's a massive answer that I could give you, but I'm conscious of time. So there's a number of different things that are in place. So one is around the training and support that we provide to our staff to understand the differences that people will have and what that differences will have on how they interact with us, how we should interact with them, and the routes that we should take. So part of it is around their understanding of what we do and how we do it. The second bit is around the processes that we have for individuals to be able to access us. So there are multiple routes for individuals to be able to access us. It's not just a case of if we email you, you can only email us back. There will be multiple routes. And that's part of our requirements around kind of reasonable adjustments and the kind of equal opportunity element of it. And then there's the last bit, which is around the route for individuals to be able to feed back to us as an organisation that actually what we've done or how we've done something hasn't been done correctly. So there's the route through the complaints process, but also within that, there's a bullying and harassment process that fits alongside that. In relation to harassment, the legislation is very clear. It's one of the rare areas with the Equality Act where it's clear as to what the definition of discrimination, harassment, victimisation are under the legislation. But that kind of discrimination and that protection under the legislation purely comes in connection to the protected characteristic. So what you can't do is go, I've been discriminated against, I've been harassed, so therefore you must do something about it. It has to be connected to the protected characteristics. The two have to work in tandem for it to be correct and proper within that space. So it's how we fit those two together. If you want a bigger conversation about it, I'm more than happy to, but I could be here for some time.
Thanks for that, Tom. Any more questions? Dave, Councillor Mansell.
Thanks. I will ask one, keep it short, but realise it's a big question, but maybe one I suspect you have pondered on. I'm just sort of wondering how the council fully delivers this due regard, bearing our financial circumstances, and especially the financial crisis now, well, I think that's it really. Yeah.
Again, I've got about 2 or 3 points. So what is the legislation? So the due regard legislation does not diminish. So what we can't do is go, we're in a financial crisis, so therefore we will ignore that bit of the legislation. The due regards consideration is as valid now as it has been, and is as robust as it should be at any other point. So what it doesn't do is diminish over time. What that does mean is that we are probably in as strong a position, or we should be as robust about that consideration of due regards, because some of the changes that we're making, some of the changes that we're considering potentially could have a substantial impact, a profound impact on individuals and what they're doing. So actually it should be more robust at this point than it is less robust. What the legislation doesn't stop us doing is taking a decision. So what it does is it says you should have due regard. So you should consider the impacts and whether or not that influences the decision that you're taking. So as much as you would consider the financial information, as much as you would consider the risk and health and safety, and all of those considerations, it goes into the pot for the consideration. What the legislation is trying to do is go kind of before it came in, that wasn't part of the decision making. It wasn't part of the consideration. We were taking decisions without kind of understanding that people that were different may have a different impact and a different outcome for what it was that we were considering and the change that we were implementing. So what it's doing is it's trying to force us as a public body paid for by public money to go, you have to consider the impact on those individuals and the difference of the impact on those considerations. So a lot of the conversations that we have around the financial situation is people going, this impact is going to be potentially substantial on our whole community. Absolutely, it might be, but this legislation is asking us to go, could that be different if you're disabled? Could that be different if you're a man or a woman? What's the difference of the impact? And is it more substantial or less substantial because of the type of individual that you are and the change that we're making? So it's very much forcing us to have that consideration. What it's not forcing us to do is go, we don't do that because of this. We might choose to go, that impact and that consideration is so profound that we don't want to take that course of action. But it's part of the information that we pull together to make the decision. Has that answered the question? Your face says no, but I'm hoping for a yes.
It does. I am think, you know, actual examples are going through my mind. I probably better not bring them up now, but yeah, it's clearly a challenge, and you wonder where it does lead us, and actually whether we've actually made some decisions we've made in the last year in the right way, which so it was one thought that occurred. But anyway, thank you for the answer. That's helpful.
Thank you. And unless there's any other questions, Tom, I think that's fine. Thank you very much for the presentation. Moving on. Item 7, the bus improvement plan. And now I'm inviting Sam Mills, who's online, to present to members for your comments. Thank you. Sam.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you very much. Apologies, members, for not being in the room today. Would you like me to carry on, or would you like Richard to?
I'm sorry, I was just distracted. The Vice Chairman rudely distracted me while you were opening, but he actually did suggest politely, actually, that perhaps the executive member would like to introduce you.
Oh, sorry, Chair.
That's all right.
Yeah, before I hand over to Sam, who will go through it in much better detail than I could. I'd just like to say what this document is, and it's a high-level look at our bus improvement plan. What it isn't is a bidding document to government. It actually sits in parallel with our local transport plan, but it's a standalone document in its own. I think it's a fantastic document that really shows where we're trying to move forward. It shows what we have delivered under the previous BSIP, and it kind of shows where we want to go, and it hits all our ambitions, which is a greener, more sustainable Somerset, a fairer, ambitious Somerset, a healthy and caring Somerset, and a flourishing and resilient Somerset. This actually hits all of those goals, which I think is rare with a document coming from the council. It has been noted that the document does fall down in one place, and thank you, Councillor Hobhouse, for pointing out that I should have brushed my hair in the photograph before it was released. But on that, I'll hand over to Sunita.
Sunita, can I just interject by saying, under the equal opportunities, and I think the mention of brushing one's hair should be banned from the room. And I think disciplinary action should be taken. Okay, carry on. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. So good morning, Chair and members. I'm here just to introduce the bus service improvement plan and thank you to Councillor Wilkins for the introduction. Just by way of kind of refreshing memories on where we are with bus service improvement plans. The original bus service improvement plan is statutory document from government. The original plan was produced in 2021, and that secured circa 11.9 million for Somerset. We asked for a significant amount more than that, so we didn't get all that we asked for. But you know, the original plan was very deliberately ambitious to say, if you want a really good bus network and a bus system in Somerset, this is what we need to do. Government came back with an answer that was 11.9 million. At the end of January this year, we had some new guidance from government to refresh our bus service improvement plan, and the new plan was due to be with government by the 12th of June. And as Councillor Wilkins has said, that it's not a bidding document. The idea was that that would release the final tranche of the 11.9 million's worth of funding that government had allocated to us. The other thing that a bus service improvement plan is not a bus strategy. So it does set out our ambition, but it doesn't kind of go there with the whole range of things that we could do with buses. And we do aim to produce a bus strategy in the coming kind of 18 months, 2 years, so that we are quite clear where we are going with our bus network. And then a new bus service improvement plan could potentially sit underneath that. This refresh of the bus service improvement plan asked us to update our baseline to reflect on where we had come from since the original plan, to set out our improvement plan for the coming year, and to set out our ambitions beyond that, so that government could be clear about where we wanted to go. So what we did was we took that original plan, updated it, and broadly the ambitions didn't change. They are pretty much the same ambitions if you track back to the original document. So as we've gone through this process, what we've done is we had quite a long conversation with the bus operators. We spoke to the bus operators individually, talked to them about what their aspirations for, what their needs were, and how we could work with them in this space. We also worked with bus users and bus stakeholders through the bus user and stakeholder forum that we have set up. We took our initial thinking to the bus advisory board at the end of April, and we've been through the planning and transport subcommittee, and alongside our submission to DFT we had to produce some bus connectivity assessments. So to say that the time frame was quite compressed for all the work that we had to do and was quite a challenge is understating it a little. So the final tranche of funding has been released. That was in our bank before the election, and we're now waiting on government for a review of what they think of our revised bus service improvement plan, but also what they're going to do next. So should funding be kind of coming to local authorities in this way in the future, we would like to then think about, okay, so what do we want to do in the future? So without running through the whole document and the report and the plan in detail, Chair, I'd like to take any questions if I can at that point.
Henry, Councillor Hobhouse.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having done my job as Vice Chair and corrected the Chairman, I wanted to ask you about SCAT, which is the Wincanton Ring and Ride buses. In the last administration, they removed the subsidy that goes to all the other Ring and Ride subsidies because they put it out to tender. Another company won the tender, but they decided to put SCAT back in at that Ring and Ride. I'm not expecting an answer now, but could you please find out for me whether you have replaced the SCAT, because South Somerset stepped in and funded the subsidy for the SCAT when the county pulled out.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm not allowed to. I'm not able to answer that immediately, Councillor. I'll come back with an answer on that one. I don't know the detail of that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good one. Yeah, Edric. Councillor Hobbs.
It's maybe vaguely related in terms of improving bus services. A large part of my division doesn't have a bus, and I understand why. It's the top of the Mendips round Priddy, very, very rural. I don't think it will sustain a bus. is there no reason we could help people get on the bus by allowing people to have access to the school transport? I don't see it as a danger to children. Plenty of children use public service bus with a bus pass. So why can spare capacity on the school bus, which serves a large part of my rural division, why can that spare capacity not be taken up by members of the public? Is there any mileage in investigating, helping people get onto transport, at least twice a day term time that way? Thank you.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I can't answer the detail. I know there are issues with the way we contract those bus services and then making them accessible to the public, but I'll come back with a response on that. I was just checking to see whether the Slinky service for that area actually covers the area you're talking about, because we do have a Slinky service in the Mendip area. And I was just trying to bring up the map while we were talking, but again, I'll come back and talk about whether there's a Slinky that might be useful for people in that area.
Okay, Councillor Dave Mansell.
Yeah, I've got 3 questions, if I may. And in relation, firstly, on page 60, there's mention of new development policies called Decide and Provide, which it seems to indicate may be able to deliver some funding for bus services and infrastructure. Are you able to say, what that potential might be? It would be interesting to know. I could speculate, but perhaps it would be good to know, what officers think that, what might be expected in way of delivery from that. And then on page 68, which refers to Slinky, I've got a sort of question which partly follows on from the one we've just had, or could be related to it. And I also represent a rural area. We do have a bus service running through it, but I have to say it's on a spiral of decline that just continues. It's been going on for some years, and I have to say the due regard question just prompted some thoughts earlier in that regard, because we are leaving people stranded without transport. Now, in relation to Slinky, which is on 68, which we do have in part of our area, and we do have a volunteer community transport provision as well. But Slinky, I do wonder whether there's more potential from this, and this is indicated in the report, and I understand it does cover 80% of Somerset, but my understanding is it's way under capacity. So it's something that we fund, but I'm not sure that we get best value from it. And clearly one way of improving value is improving it, which is the aim of the pilot now underway in Somerton. I have a feeling that something else mentioned on page 68 could also achieve great benefit, and that is feeding into the core network. If Slinky could actually be used to go round, and I think there should even be a little bit of a scheduled part of Slinky, so some on demand and some scheduled, so it actually goes round parishes without a bus service and delivers them in where there is a bus service, so that bus service has got more passengers, so it helps with the bus services which are declining. So sort of connecting Slinky and the bus services together, I was sort of feeling there's some potential there if we could sort of plan the two together. So interested any comments and urge that as something to be looked at. And then just thirdly, and I don't know whether there's anything to say on this yet, but the route we're going down with the improvement plan is the enhanced partnership, which was, part of the previous government's approach. The new government's indicated so far that it seems to be particularly interested in franchising. Is there anything that we might have from a Somerset perspective on that, whether it's a way forward or whether we're expecting to entirely continue along the enhanced partnerships?
Thank you, Dave. Sam.
Thank you, Chair. So on decide and provide, that's kind of the I guess the new approach in transport planning, that basically talks. What we used to do is predict and provide. We would predict the amount of traffic that we were expecting, and then we would provide traffic capacity. The idea with divide and provide, that you'll sometimes hear called vision and validate, they're the same thing, but the idea with divide and provide is that we will say, how do we want people to move in this space, whether it's a new development, a town, or you know, a smaller community, or whatever it is. How do we want people to move, and then what is it that we need to make sure that is in place for them to be able to do that? So broadly, we might be looking at a package of walking and cycling measures, in addition to a package of bus measures, in addition to a package of other improvements that might help them, whether that be car clubs or something like that. So it's looking at transport in the round, as opposed to saying, what do we need to do to provide for the car? That's the first point of it. And in terms of the way we're using it with developers, we've started working with developers now on this approach, and developers are actually quite keen. For one reason is that it means that they have to deliver kind of less big infrastructure, and it means that we can then use the money that would have gone into providing big infrastructure, big road junctions and the like, for doing other things. So we can ask for potential subsidies for buses or other things. I'd say we're in the infancy at the moment, so learning our lessons as we go along to understand what's best. There is a challenge with this, and what I would say to members is it's great to ask for funding from developments for bus subsidy for bus services. But we have to think about what happens when that subsidy runs out, and how do we make sure that the services can keep going beyond the life of that subsidy? So how do we make sure the services become commercial, so that they stand up on their own? Because what the last thing we want is to put a service in, get people using it from a community, and they rely on it, and then the service can't be sustained in the longer term, and the service has to fall away. And I think, you know, part of that is the experience that we're having in the spiral of decline in the area that Councillor Mansell is explaining. Councillor Mansell, we've had quite a lot of conversations around bus transport in your area, so I understand where you're coming from. So we just need to be quite cautious on how we ask for development money, and then how we use it, and how long term that's going to be. On Slinky, I think I agree. There are definitely opportunities for improvement. The trial that we're doing in Somerton, we're early days. We only started in May, so we're looking to understand in the next few months how that's going and what the opportunities are. Do agree about linking into other services. It's definitely the thing that's on our radar, is that we use Slinky as part of a network approach. What we have to be incredibly careful with is that we don't leave people at bus stops, so we need to get the interconnections right, because we don't want to leave people stranded. So absolutely agree on that one, and very happy to have further conversations on that. On enhanced partnerships and franchising, honestly it's too early to tell. We've had very little from government so far. Obviously the King's speech highlighted the government wanted to push forwards with franchising. What I would say is that franchising in a rural county like Somerset is going to be incredibly expensive. So we would be looking for government to fund that, because there isn't funding for us to do that at this point. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can I come back to you on the Slinky thing, because I've just been involved in some discussions about contracts for Slinky, which are still in negotiation or about to be concluded. Would that does that impede us in actually attempting to develop that service, or does it tie us too heavily into a particular routine?
No, so the contracts we've put in place are at this point for 2 years plus, or about to put in place, sorry, the decision hasn't been taken yet. Are for 2 years with an option of 1 year and another 1 year. That gives us time to review where we are with the digital Slinky, understand what our Slinky network needs to look like going forwards, and then plan for any reprocurement, because obviously reprocurement takes a period of time. So we think that the contracts that we are looking to put in place in the next few weeks probably give us the right amount of time to be able to review the whole service.
Thank you. I think Richard wanted to come back on one of Dave's questions. Is that right?
Yeah, I was going to come in on just two points that you were making. One was on the new digital slinky in Somerton, and just to say that it is a trial and it has been flexible. So where we drew an initial boundary, it seems that need has made the boundary slightly warp in certain areas to encompass slightly more. But it's an ongoing trial, and we're trying to, so we're trying to get the best out of it, and we're looking at every option, so that we get the best out of our slinkies, to be quite honest. So we're there. The other thing on I'd just like to point out that London and Manchester are kind of the only places that have done the franchising so far, as far as I know, and they are very urban based. And I think we've got to be very careful how we look at franchising in Somerset, and to make sure that we don't go down any dark alleys we don't want to go down. At what the government brings us, but it's quite clear that we are not the same as London. We're not the same as Manchester. So we just got to be very clear about what we are and what we can bring. Sorry,
Thank you.
Jump in on you there, Sunita. But
thank you for that clarification. Councillor Marcus Kravitz, please.
Oh, you put a Z on the end. Sounds even more Ukrainian. Thank you, Chair. I genuinely don't know where. I mean, I have a question on this because obviously, and apologies, Dixie, but I did print out all of this so I could read it and not miss it. But I think I can justify that somewhere. And you look at improvements, and it's a nice document. I enjoyed reading thoughts about the population and the statistics and everything else. But what I couldn't see was any new routes, and I was looking through this bit, and I think a couple of you might know what's about to come, but on page 40 it talks about the economy, and we talk about subsidising rural areas. And of course, you can't just look at it whether the bus company is making money out the route, because of the economic impact of people from, say, Minehead being able to go to Bridgewater instead of having to go to Taunton and having to go via an hour-and-a-half journey and maybe get a train. I mean, apparently the 28 is being more efficient now and is actually turning up a bit more often, which is always a result. But obviously, and I see the councillor at the back of the room, the 21 isn't though in Taunton. That's an absolute nightmare. And you've got 15-year-old kids that sat there, 16-year-old kids stood at bus stops thinking, is the bus going to turn up? And no, it doesn't. And then the next one doesn't turn up. And then their parents in West Somerset thinking, this is all getting a bit personal now, but thinking, how the hell are we going to get home? Or how are they going to get home? And if they do get home, what time are they going to be at the bus stop so we can go and pick them up? I mean, the problem we've got is we've got a bus service that actually, if you're in a rural area, theoretically doesn't work. And that's looking at youngsters. I was at a meeting the other day and we had a more elderly lady talking about how she might have to move to Taunton because she can't really survive because she doesn't drive. And living in West Somerset, not being able to drive, apart from the fact the housing situation, rents, etc., getting ridiculous. So suddenly she's having to live in Taunton. And we talk about urbanisation, we talk about the urban things of London and Manchester. Well, I've got a daughter who lives in Taunton, and she'll pass a driving test. Well, she'll still catch the bus to work because it'll cost £1. It'll go along the bus lanes, and she works in Blackbrook, and you can't park there anyway. Well, I've got a stepdaughter who, unless she passes her test in August, for her to pass her test, because she's fortunate enough to have nice middle-class parents who can afford to buy a car and afford to insure that car, right? It will change her life. Yet she's very fortunate because she's got a little bit of backing behind her. Where in Minehead, lowest social mobility in the country in West Somerset, I need to just get in there. Other people haven't got that opportunity, and we need to deal with it. And we can sit here looking at bus improvement plan, but unless we put a point where we have buses that get to where people want to go, all those opportunities we're going to have in Bridgewater. I'm sorry to be parochial and go on about West Somerset, but that I'm a ward member in West Somerset, but it's a rural community. You've got all that happening economically in Bridgewater. Yet if you want to get from Minehead to Bridgewater, you can't even go for a job interview, let her go and get a job, unless you own a car. I mean, this can't carry on in the situation that it's carrying in. They talk about slinky buses, fantastic idea. I was in South Africa in 2010, I believe it was. You go to South Africa, there's minibuses everywhere. You just jump on a minibus. And then I did end up in a couple of townships where I got told to get from one minibus to another minibus, and it all got a bit weird. But I got to where I wanted to go, and I was an Englishman in a country where I didn't have a clue where I was going, but they had a better bus service. I mean, and that was 15 years ago. Yeah, and we need to make sure that you don't leave school children at bus stops. You don't leave old people at bus stops, because if they can't get to Taunton by a certain time, then they haven't got a bus service back to West Somerset. And that's probably, the councillors in Yeovil, I'm turning into a rant. I appreciate that, Chair. Apologies for this, but I do feel quite strongly on it. The bus service people in Yeovil talk about the bus service to Taunton and how that affects them. At what point are we going to make sure, let's get the basics right, let's get buses turning up, that would be a start. I mean, and without, obviously I've been listening to too many Nigel Farage TikToks, but if you said to me, is your priority electrifying buses or having more bus drivers and more buses, I'd say, let's not electrify them, let's put the money into that instead. And then another issue is, obviously, talk about urbanisation. You turn up at a bus stop in London, you know exactly what bus is coming when. Obviously, we now have the apps that do that. But if you're 55 years old, you probably didn't even know there was an app that tells you the bus is around the corner and what time it's going to appear. And you might not use it. Is that information getting out there? I think my question is, new routes was my question at the start of all that. When
would be nice.
When will we get a bus from West Somerset directly to Bridgewater, so all the people in West Somerset don't have to rely on getting a job in Taunton when there's probably better jobs elsewhere? Thank you.
Sam.
Thank you, Chair.
I'll point the portfolio holder.
I'll point to the table on page 87 that sets out our ambition for 2025 and beyond. We talk in that table about review the bus network and develop a strategy to improve frequencies and coverage, and the point there is about coverage across the network, and that includes evening, weekends, college, etc., etc., etc. It's always going to be an ongoing activity because simply the demands change really frequently, but it is always about where we can get the money to deliver those services. If we can't demonstrate to operators that they will operate commercially, we will need to find public funds to make those services work. And I totally understand where Councillor's coming from. And we will look really carefully at the network and try and understand where the key demands are as we move forwards, and understand what our opportunities will be in that space.
Thank you very much. I'm going to bring in Mike Stanton because he's had his hand up online for quite some time. Mike.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point, responding to Marcus, really, that because I was involved in the working party with Sunita when I was on South Somerset on digital demand responsive transport. It's not going to be possible to meet the needs of our population with fixed bus routes. That's a way of dealing with buses that's 100 years old and Edwardian and not fit for the future. The proper solution is digital demand responsive transport. So that, to my mind, that is the most important part of this bus service improvement plan. It needs investment, so it has to be long term. We can't do it now. But the direction of travel must be for people to be able to go on an app or ring up if they don't use a smartphone, and say where they want to go, where they want to go from, and have a minibus turn up close to their home. No need to stand at bus stops, no need to maintain bus stops, which are nice or anyway very often. So I think we really should focus our attention on that digital demand responsive transport. Apologies for my voice, I'm down with COVID.
Okay, Mike, do you need to respond to that? Sam, seems fairly straightforward. Okay, thank you. I'll move on then to Edric.
Thank you. I agree a lot with what Marcus said about, rural transport poverty. Again, like many of us, my area is rural. Parts of it, I haven't seen a bus in 40 odd years, or longer, because I can remember busing pretty when I was a kid, and that was 50 years ago. And I appreciate you can get a bus everywhere, as Mike Stanton's just said. Is there any way you can have a place like Wookey Hole on the way to Priddy, where I grew up? Is there any way you could have a bus which is sort of part demand led, so it goes to Wookey Hole or anywhere else busy, and there's a layover time. If somebody on an app is booked to the bus in a certain time frame, the bus either has a short layover, or if a demand comes in for a bus, then it can go to the nearest village and pick somebody up. I appreciate there is no point having buses going to lots of these places all the time. They wouldn't pick anybody up. They wouldn't succeed. Another point I'd like to make in relation to buses, it does relate to cycling, not just on a Saturday night when I cycle 35 miles, but in some parts of the country, bus operators do carry bicycles. They do it in East Yorkshire and the Selby area. East Yorkshire buses, I can see St Oswald, invested heavily in a bus infrastructure. Now, part of my division has a brilliant bus. If you live in Chute Mendip, you probably think, using a phrase, the bus service, the Dogs Dewberries. Every half hour you can get a bus to Wales or into Bristol, all times of day and night. But if you live somewhere like Ston Easton or Lytton or Priddy, you're only 2 or 3 miles up a bus route. Why can't you stick your bike on the bus? There's plenty of room on buses which carry wheelchairs and prams and buggies. I know First has said it's not feasible. I disagree with them totally. It's been done in other areas. It was also done in the Scottish borders as well, because I've investigated this over a few years. And I think we need to investigate with the operators the ability to just carry a box standard push bike on a bus, which turns a walk from, say, the 376 bus, which is Wells to Bristol bus into Prid, it's a 3.5 mile walk. That's 25 minutes bike ride to somebody. I think we need to investigate cutting down on the rural transport poverty through other means as well.
Thank you. Sam?
Thank you, Chair. On the demand responsive transport, my feeling is, and I've got nothing to substantiate this, but my feeling is as the technology improves, we will be able to be more responsive and more led by kind of individual demand in individual area. So, you know, at the moment, we've moved from a system where you have to book 24 hours in advance to the digital system that we're introducing in Somerton, where you have to book an hour in advance. I think that hour in advance time will come down as the technology improves and as we get more used to doing demand responsive transport. So I think there will be ways that we can improve the service and go to places and potentially have a semi demand responsive type service. But that would mean, as we look at the model for the future, we would work out how we do that. It's not something that we can say we're absolutely do today, but definitely as the model evolves, I think there's some potential in there. On bikes on buses, I'd refer you to page 95 of the agenda pack. There is a commitment in the what section is this called? Sorry, I think this is the 2025 and beyond section, to look at a trial of bikes on buses, do a short feasibility study and look at a trial of bikes on buses, and we're aiming to do that in 2025, 26 and the time a couple of years after that. So yeah, it's there, it's in the plan. We would obviously need some funding to do that from government, but we can talk about how we can fund it once we know where government is going.
Thank you. I've got Henry next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Later on our papers, we have got figures for the amount of cars ownership there is in Somerset as compared to the ownership in the rest of the country. And we are caught in a real catch-22, because while we don't have money to invest in improving the buses, everyone buys a car. Once they have a car, they don't use the buses, and it's nearly impossible to make the buses profitable. I think there's a fundamental question to be asked here of the government, is at what point are they going to throw enough money into a rural county like Somerset to overcome the catch-22? I really do feel that strongly, and I think it's a question that we need to make sure that we are asking regularly. Sam?
I don't disagree, Chair, with the statement that's been made by Councillor Hobhouse. You know, it's one of those things where we are producing these sorts of documents fairly regularly, but our engagement with government needs to be kind of on a different level, I would suggest, than this sort of document. And we are already talking about kind of internally what the franchising opportunity might look like. If there were an opportunity for us with franchising, I think, and a trial, I think we might be open to that if the right amount of money comes, because that could bring that level of improvement that we're talking about.
Thank you, Sam. Richard would like to answer Henry's point.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But as a county, I think the was it the decide and provide method that we are going down now actually helps in that, because it gives, rather than just providing for cars, it gives the opportunity for people to use other options, which hasn't always been, is definitely not there at the moment. But when we move forward, build new areas, we're now looking at providing the opportunities so people can move away from always going into their car as their first choice. And without that, it will always be that downward spiral that you're talking about, Henry. It's not an easy one to actually break, and you're quite right. We do require extra government funding to be able to break that cycle, but we are moving in that direction as a council and as a county.
Thank you. Mickey, I think, wanted to respond.
Yeah, just wanted to add, so in the productivity plan that the executive signed off the other week, it's got the kind of key asks from Somerset Council of Government in it, and that really will form the framework of our lobbying. So it's really important. We can't ask for everything, but we have ensured that that particular item that Henry raises in terms of long-term funding focused on rural transport, and it's not just about net zero, it's about social mobility and all those other reasons. That is absolutely there as one of our top level asks that will guide our lobbying as we go forward.
Thank you. Alan Bradford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is obviously a problem that we could sit here until the cows come home. We'd never solve it, because Somerset being like it is and Devon being a lot worse. And to follow on from Councillor Kravis's statement and questions, actually, a few years ago at Sedgemoor, we negotiated a run on the Hinkley Point buses down to West Somerset, down and back, and that worked out for a. For my first question, has that come to an end?
No, it still goes 3 times a day, and if you
there you go, 3 times a day. So
although, and it's actually now you can actually find out how to contact it and find a timetable. But I think it did involve a phone call the other day.
So that could be a learning curve here, really. And we haven't got too many village schools left, but some have buses provided, and it could always be a bus going to the school. And when that bus gets to school, what happens? It's empty back to its depot. So you're in a village area. If people knew that bus was empty going back from the school back to their depot, going through various areas, you can kill 2 birds with 1 stone there very easily. It's not a great thinker. You can, a bit of common sense again, sorry. And if you were doing it, farmers are good for adapting to situations. And there's a situation we could quite easily adapt to if it was at all possible. Now, what happens when Hinkley Point finish, I don't know. That's probably 3 or 4 years. So that'll be looked at that end. But surely that is a learning curve. You go one place with a full load, unload, it's empty, and you come back with a full load, picking people up and all the way back through again. And that would do, and a lot of the problem is there's not too many village schools open like it used to be, but there is quite a lot in various areas. And with the education system like it is, able to pick and choose what school you're going to go to, which I think is ludicrous sometimes, then these buses had to travel in diversified routes quite easily. It's just an idea, and I'd just like to know your opinions or the committee actually. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I'll hand it back to Sam first.
Thank you, Chair. I can definitely look into the use of buses on the school buses on the return trips. I'm not an expert, and colleagues aren't with me today, but my knowledge is that we register the way those bus services are registered might preclude them being used for anything else. So we would need to look into that, because they are registered with the Traffic Commissioner as specific types of route and not scheduled bus services, if that makes sense. So, but I can have conversation with colleagues and we can come back to members with a better answer than I've just given.
But the one thing, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to say, if we continue to have the traffic issue we've had in Somerset for the last months, the M5 block, and you all know my views on that, and these buses will be stood still most of the time. And that's a real issue. And we get up our own waste collection lorries. It must be very frustrating for these drivers to be 2 and 3 days behind what they're doing because of traffic issues and what have you. And it really has to be looked into, and there's got to be some way around that.
Particularly true if you're trying to get to a council meeting, I would agree. Thank you, Alan.
Thank you very much.
I've got Dixie.
Thanks. In many ways, Henry stole my thunder, actually, as he sort of summed up very well the situation that we're in. But I just wanted to say that I think that the little impassioned speech, I won't call it a rant, that we had from Councillor Cravis would probably actually be echoed by rural communities all over Somerset, not just West Somerset, really. I think if we had other people here, they'd be diving in on that bandwagon. And, it's all because the bus services they have to be commercially viable. They are kind of private companies. All we can do is what extra money there is, decide to allocate it to, what we perceive to be the highest priority route. There will always be communities in Somerset who feel that they are missing out. And I think, our ask of central government in supporting us to make bus travel much more of a kind of a key priority. And I think modernising the system, as Mike Stanton has mentioned, is definitely the way to go. And yes, there will be people who, can't use apps. I still won't use telephone parking app because I've never been able to get it to work. That's not a reason not to use technology. We need to support the people who struggle with it through that transition rather than chuck out that option, because I think that a demand-led service is going to be much more efficient. And I just wanted to kind of talk about the sort of the chicken and the egg that we have with people reliant on cars. So what we need is not just more provision, but a change in behaviours to make public transport much more normal rather than an exceptional thing. And I know that Councillor Rigby, when he was portfolio holder for transport, put a lot of work into trying to get that behaviour change. Folk put some money into Taunton, and there were really good results that we had. Our bus usage improved radically, but the effort it takes, like that, required a concentrated amount of money and media, lots and lots of kind of strategies within a small space to see that shift. So it's a big challenge, and I think the BSEP report is really about what we can do, what we aspire to do, and working with those bus providers as well. And I think there have been some good suggestions today around utilising existing transport. There may be obstacles to that, but definitely worth exploring. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Edric, you wanted to come back in, did you?
Just quickly. So Councillor Bradford's comments basically backed up mine about utilising school transport. And Sam Online said the way they're registered with the Traffic Commissioner differs. If there is a variation to the way they are registered, is there a cost implication to overcome?
Sam, did you catch that?
I did catch that. Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure is the honest answer, so we'll have a conversation with the team and understand that and come back to you.
Sorry, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't wish to sort of tread on the ground perhaps that I shouldn't be treading on, but Monkton Heathfield development, decide and provide. Start buses halfway through the development. People have got their cars already. We then got a service that went all round the house that took too long to get there. So it doesn't work. It has to be on time, which the service that it's got at the moment is. It has to be an appropriate travel time and an affordable price, which all three things it is. And it is because we've got some of the Somerset buses that after school children time come out and run round, if you like, out to Monkton Heathfield and back in. We're now coming near the end of the money, unfortunately, that it was funded with, and by hook and by crook, we're having to halve the service, which means we might lose a lot of the people, and it's almost coming up to a break-even stage. But it took a long time to get it there. Now that gets cut back down, we'll lose some customers, but it'll keep it going until the start of the next development, perhaps up at Monkton Heathfield 2 or Langalla Park. Decide and provide is all very well, but if you want to decide that you want people not to have cars on your new estate, you need to provide the level of service that we've got in MH1 at the moment from the beginning, and then people will say, this works, we don't actually need the car because we know it's going to be there on time. The other thing that I don't believe we can do anything about, but is an absolute bugbear, I agree with Councillor Kravis, and that is 21 timed schedule from Taunton to Bridgewater is all over the place. Our bus service, the minibus service, mustn't run within a certain time of the pickup of the 21 bus either side of it. It's excluded from that. We've worked the programme out, that's fine. But in actual fact, it doesn't matter very much because quite often the 21 and our buses are there at the same time and people will choose our bus. That's by the by. It's simply because that 21 service isn't necessarily reliable enough for people to use. But the plea is that if you're going down to decide and provide the bus service right at the beginning.
Yes, Councillor Cavill. Sam, did you want to answer?
I don't disagree with Councillor Cavill on that. I think, you know, we're learning from that experience on decide and provide, and I think that was my note of caution that I mentioned earlier, was about making sure that the service is sustainable through that approach, beyond the time that, you know, you might think it might need to be. So yeah. I think I would agree. On the 21 time schedule, I think that's a commercial service that's operated by the operator, but we work really closely with the operator to understand where we might be able to help to make sure that services are kind of running to timetable. And that's part of the bus improvement plan. Is if buses are getting caught in traffic, we might think about where the buses are getting caught in traffic and what we might be able to do about it. So those things are all captured in that bus improvement plan.
Thank you very much. I have the habit of moving on to the next items rather than summarising these, but I think actually Dixie summarised. Did you want to speak, Richard? Sorry.
Well,
sorry, bringing Richard Williams in.
Wilkins.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to summarise and say that actually all the comments are very valid that we've heard today. But it does feed into what this document is about, and that is this document does show where we've put the money in, where we have with the previous BSIT made significant changes to the way we run our buses. It has been effective, and it demonstrates where we've been effective. And it will also go on to show where we can be more effective in the future, given the funding. But it's quite clear if we don't have the right funding, it's just an aspiration. However, this document isn't about asking for more money directly, but it does demonstrate how we can improve Somerset's bus service. It's quite clear on that in every direction, and it sets it out in, well, I'll say black and white, but you know what I mean. So to summarise, this is a necessary document. Let's hope that note is taken of it, and I hope you all can appreciate the work that's gone behind it and the fact that it is what it's aimed at and it moves forward. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Richard. And thank you, Sam, for bringing this forward. I'd just like to sort of make probably a last question, really. I think what seems to be coming from the floor throughout is this issue of our rural services. Being such a large rural county and with a very limited train service as well. And, you know, certainly where I am in Frome, most of our services will be running, people need buses to get to Bath and probably Trowbridge. Those in another authority, does that impede you in any way in seeking funding? Does that cause problems?
It doesn't. We work really closely with neighbouring authorities, and so the bus partnership that we have works across boundary for those services as well. So we join in their meetings and they join in our meetings. So it's a really collaborative approach on those cross boundary services. So there isn't an impediment. What I'd say is we at the moment haven't asked for significant amounts of funding to look at those services. It's in the plan to think about those services better and how we get that better connectivity into those bigger urban areas. But that's a future ask, I think.
Thank you. Just one final comment. I'm wondering if the government, the powers that be, really understand there's a very distinct difference between taking a car to a park and ride in, say, Bristol or Bath, and keeping the traffic off the road and enabling you to get to your destination quicker by actually doing that, than there is in what we're trying to do is to get the buses to the people. And they're quite distinct and different things. And I noticed that Bath and Bristol particularly are very well serviced for park and ride. But there are different concepts as to why we need bus services. And I'm not sure that rural communities are really thought of at government level on the same way. I think I'll thank you very much. I think bring that to a conclusion. The clock doesn't work. Oh no, it is actually. Does anybody need a break? Yeah, okay, 5 minutes then. Thank you. Right, thank you all. I think we're all back. So we will move on to agenda item 8, waste service. Mike, who's the patience of a saint, has been deferred previously and gets bumped down the list and everything, but here we are. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Thanks for having me today. If we could just go to the next slide. So this is in respect to the flexible plastics collection expansion. Is that okay? Yeah. So this is just in regard to the flexible plastics expansion. So if we could just move to the next slide, please. Sorry. So the trial is being funded by Future Recycling Limited and involves 2 stages. And the financing covers the fixed asset cost, bins, bags, boxes, weighing system, cages, compactors, and modifications to facilities, associated costs associated with storage, treatment, testing, communications and training. And I think importantly through this, the only kind of cost impact the only impact to Somerset Council is staff time involved in the project. The trial has had 2 stages. So the first trial involved 3,500 properties, and that commenced during May last year, and an extension to 21,000 properties from autumn this year. Phase 2 of the trial will take place from Frome, Wells, Chilcompton, Radstock and the surrounding villages, as shown in the map there on the bottom right. I think it's important to say that the trial is only being done in this part of the county because the transfer station service in the east of the county is most suited to modification. The alternative option is the transfer station in Taunton, but it would require significant modification to the transfer station, and the capital value of the modification would be in excess of the funding allowance of the trial. And I think ultimately what the purpose of the trial is to seek to understand the costs, the operational efficiencies and challenges associated with different types of collection methodologies, the sorting processes, logistics, and reprocessing of flexible plastics. And really, it's there for the kind of government to understand and industry to understand the logistical and operational impact of collecting these materials. If you want to move to the next slide, please, if that's okay. So in terms of flexible plastics themselves, they are a challenging material to collect and recycle. They're comprised of many different types of plastics and in some cases multi-layered materials such as food pouches, making up kind of laminated layers of metals and plastics. But it's at the moment there is not a capacity or the requirement to collect food pouches. Flexible plastics comprise roughly about 8% by weight of residual waste, but it's a lightweight material that takes a lot of material in the refuse bin. And I think it's safe to say that residents are very keen to recycle flexible plastics. This is a very welcome addition to our scheme. In terms of phase 1 of the trial to the 3,600 properties, it was very successful, and there was very impressive participation from Is that okay now? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So on each collection cycle across the 3,600 properties, about 1,800 bags were produced, and then kind of really impressively, about 65%. About 500 kilos of recycled material is captured from each cycle from participating residents. And service user compliance with the trial has been very, very positive indeed, with a very tiny percentage of bags being rejected from processors, which is about 1 in 400, which is really excellent and testament to the engagement of the public in those areas. The trial has been popular in Somerset, with participation rates exceeding project objectives, and I think it's been achieved by concise and clear communications developed in partnership with RAP, and positive and ongoing communications with residents by Suez and Waste Services staff. The communication strategy for the expansion will involve several steps to ensure the residents are fully informed and engaged. All trial households will be written to twice before the trial commences, with the first communication being warm-up literature, and the second being detailed instructions, including instructions about what materials will be presented, as well as a supply of blue bags to present the material for collection in. There will be drop-in sessions held for local residents to answer any questions or queries that they have around the new service, and further nudge communications are scheduled to be provided about a month after the collection is commenced, to ensure that participations are fully on board. The low levels of contamination presentation rates from phase 1 demonstrate the effectiveness of the communication engagement with residents, showing that the kind of clear, concise information that we produced already has worked well and was readily understood. And I'd just like to invite any questions at all.
Thank you for that. That's brilliant. Thank you. Any questions? Mike Rigby, Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks for the presentation. Really positive stuff. I think I'm really pleased to hear that it's been well received. I thought it probably would be, and also that the contamination rates are low, because that's always a risk with this sort of thing. And I know from personal experience, we're probably what I would call hyper recyclers at home. There isn't much left behind until the co-op, our local co-op, came up with the ability to return your soft plastics, I'd say that that was probably 50%, certainly by volume, if not weight, of everything that we were then throwing away. It was the last bit of the puzzle, but it's a bit of a pain having to sort of store it and then, you know, once a month take some manky bag down the co-op, and I don't suppose they're particularly pleased to receive it either, given that they're a food shop. So I think this will be a great step forward, and I would suspect that it will make quite a radical difference to the volume of waste that we end up collecting. So good work. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Yes, Dave Manson.
Sorry, I just feel I should comment. I'm very happy with all of this and pleased to see what's going. Thank you for the information on where the plastic's going to. That was reassuring and pleased to hear, because I know the markets for the material are challenging, but it sounds as though, you know, that there's genuine work going on to set that up. I will mention, and in a previous life, waste recycling was my business. This is where my career was, and in fact, in my previous existence, I was the manager of the trial in 2015, so 9 years ago, where the trial rounds were in Taunton, and from what it sounds as though, you know, the results are fairly good. Unfortunately, our market disappeared soon after the successful trials at that time. So it's good to see that you can now move this forward, and it does look promising. It does need the industry backing to ensure the market and the use for the material and quite rightly funding to enable the scheme to happen. But as Mike says, it largely has the potential to take the last biggest item out of our refuse. So getting this part of the system would be, you know, really good. It doesn't mean we need to stop having attention on waste reduction and designing packaging so it's easy for recycling and is only there when it's necessary. But recycling will still be needed, I'm sure of that. And this looks very promising. So thank you and well done.
Yeah, thank you. I'm pleased. I'm on this trial, been on this trial, as you know, and I think it's good. 65% return rate's not bad. What I would say is it is a pretty fiddly process. I spend much more time trying to separate the flexi plastics from the other stuff and put it in the separate bag. Now, I don't think that's your fault or anything you can do about it, but I can see why people that have got less conscientious might just chuck some of the flexi plastics in the green bin, frankly, because it does involve a bit of input from the individual, and it's just a question, I suppose, of getting people used to that commitment, you know, when they throw things away. I don't know that there's an answer to that, but if you've got one, I'd be happy to hear.
Yeah, no, I just think that's kind of basically part and parcel of the trials, is just really to kind of understand that feedback and actually understand what further kind of engagement we can do to ensure that kind of behaviour is kind of is like kind of limited as far as possible. There are kind of a number of trials kind of across basically across the United Kingdom. I think we're part of one of 12 at the moment that is kind of participating on this basic kind of in this kind of service. We kind of hope to pull those results and actually identify those like kind of barriers and tailor our kind of ongoing communications and education just to try and avoid that as far as possible.
Thank you. I think Marcus had his hand up first.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, it was just and apologies, I was struggling with my eyesight and my glasses weren't helping. I think I might need to get my eyes tested again. On the 65% uptake, obviously that's 35% not doing it. Are there any sort of demographics of who's doing it and who isn't? I mean, is it younger people are doing it and older people don't believe it, or is it older people are doing it because they've got more time to do it and younger people are too busy trying to, you know, sort out kids and everything else and probably using too much, just haven't got the time? Have we got any breakdown of who it is, and is it an education thing that, you know, in 20 years time everybody would have gone through education knowing about recycling and doing more?
I think it's kind of quite early days to answer that at the moment. In terms of the trial participants at the moment, they are kind of low income, rural, or basically semi-rural, or semi-rural demographic. That's kind of why we've basically chosen that, actually just to understand just to understand the kind of wider participation rates. I think that's certainly that as we kind of expand the trial into a different range of basic demographics, that's something we can kind of basically that we will be looking into in terms of understanding a little bit more what the barriers are for participation. What we've seen in Somerset is 65% participation is significantly higher than other trial areas, such as basically that where FPL have deployed similar trials into. So we're quite good, but you're right in terms of actually understanding actually that other 35%, why aren't they doing it? And that's certainly something that we'll be looking to understand and achieve a little bit better as we kind of progress through this larger trial area.
Thank you. Dixie, I think you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Yes, a bit cheeky of me to ask a question of Mike, given I'm the portfolio holder, but there's something I don't know and I'd quite like to know. So I'm just looking at the stuff that can't go in that flexible recycling, in particular the pouches, which I know are really hard to recycle, and lots of people have their baby food, pet food, all of those. My understanding is we're still waiting for extended producer responsibility legislation to be finalised. It's kind of it's been coming for some time, but it's not there. When we finally have that and producers have to take more responsibility for their packaging and their waste, do you think we might see a phasing out of those very difficult to process and recycle packaging materials?
Try and answer that as best as I can. So, so the kind of whole ethos behind this is the producer pays responsibility. And from my understanding is that the packaging producers, if there's not a means to extract and remove that material from the recycling scheme, ultimately they'll be kind of paying for the disposal of that, or a proportion of the disposal of that. So it's there to kind of really incentivize them to kind of look at how they produce their packaging and what it's comprised of in terms of ease of recyclability, so that they can contribute less to its disposal and push it more towards a more kind of sustainable recycling-led approach.
Yeah, I think sort of a summary as well. I'm wondering if the take up as well depends somehow, perhaps, on how easy it is to access your recycling bins, because people are living in apartments or flats, probably have communal areas. They don't want to spend a lot of time in those areas, and they tend to, they might be putting stuff in the green bin that should otherwise be recycled. It's interesting what you said about the take up in that respect, making it easier. Thank you. I don't think sorry, Mickey.
Just because you've given me the prompt to plug the team's developer guidance, because getting the design at the outset right of those communal areas is absolutely critical, and will become even more so as the expectation on people in those properties, as they should, having access to exactly the same level of service as domestic, a normal in inverted commas house. But any time any of you are involved as local members in looking at planning applications, just make sure you think about those communal areas, because that's the opportunity to lock in something that enables people to behave in the right way or makes it much harder for them.
Thank you. That being that, I think that's the end of that item. Thank you very much for that report. Oh, the second part. I'm sorry, I've missed the second part. Missed the second part of it. I'm leaping ahead.
Yeah, thanks,
Kirsty.
Chair. Just trying to share my screen, so hopefully that. Yes, good. So this is a run through regarding the update report that went to executive, I think last week, but the weeks tend to merge into one another, and it was given approval. But I thought it'd be helpful to run through a few short slides regarding the decision and the work that was done behind the decision as well. It's also worth saying that part of the report is confidential. That should be highlighted in your packs. If you want to ask questions on that, we will need to go into a confidential session, Chair. So a motion will need to be provided for that to happen. I'm hoping that we can discuss in enough detail without that, but obviously if we do need to, we'll have to do that before asking that question. So just, yes, displaying. Sorry, I thought it wasn't displaying correctly. So just some really quick background. The value of the contract was £24 million per year. It commenced on the April 2020. So just probably at the worst time possible as COVID was hitting across the country. It's a 10-year contract with an option to extend for 10 years. It's obviously a statutory service and it is critical to the council plan priority for a greener Somerset. It also provides some key social value enterprises as well through our partnership with Sewers. So the contract originally was procured and via a competitive tendering process by the Waste Partnership. Obviously, at that point, it was the County Council and the District Councils that made up that Waste Partnership. There was very thorough, effective and strong governance process applied to that and also scrutiny at the time. In December last year, Suez disclosed to us that they were making a significant loss on the contract. They requested a formal variation to the contract to increase payments. Otherwise, they indicated they would likely terminate the contract. Since the contract's commenced, as I've already mentioned, COVID has been a challenge. Then there was a national driver shortage, inflation, and there's been some unestimated complexity and cost of the operation. I think Somerset, as you all know, is a huge geographical area with a big variety of some urban areas, but a lot of rural areas, making it complex to run and manage. So the recommendations that went to executive were for Suez to receive an additional £3 million this financial year and then further payments until the end of the contract. So next year that was circa 7 million, and then from 26-27 it's 9.25 million. To protect the council, we also requested an increase in the liability cap within the contract, and that amount is in the confidential paper. We've also requested delegated authority to the head of legal services to draw up and complete the legal documents. We've also made some changes within the contract to deal with unforeseen circumstances in relation to clinical waste. And then delegated authority was given to the chief exec to sign off the final contract variation. Once we've done that, we will need to present on the procurement portal, we'll need to present a contract notice that it's changing. That will be on there for 30 days. And that's the process we follow. It is one of the risks is around legal challenge to that. So there is a potential. We believe that's the low risk, but obviously it has high impact if it is challenged. And we will need to defend that as the council because we are procuring that service. It's worth mentioning that we looked at a number of options as well. So this wasn't the only option we looked at. We also appointed a technical consultant to review and verify the open book costs that Suez have provided to us, but also to assess the costs and risks and merits of other service delivery models. Internally, we set up a steering group comprised of senior officers from legal, procurement, finance and waste services. The other options considered were a local authority trading company, the direct labour organisation, so bringing the whole operation in-house that we would run as we do our depots, etc. Reprocurement of the contract and renegotiating the contract with Suez. Some of the key outcomes from that piece of work was the lead-in times for any of the alternative options, which we believe will be at least 12 months, more likely longer for a LATCO or a direct labour organisation. That means that we would be paying incredibly expensive costs to Suez during that period as we moved over to an alternative service. All of the options available are more expensive than the existing arrangements. It's just worth noting there was not a cost neutral option to any of this, unfortunately and frustratingly. And then the renegotiation with Suez, which has taken some months, has provided the most financially favourable outcome, but also provides stability to a crucial service. Within the papers, this is in there, but the risks of the alternatives. So as I've mentioned, transition costs that sewers would place on us if we moved to an alternative model, the complexity of mobilising under a strict time pressure, and some of the legal aspects involved in early termination, and we suspect retrospective claims. Obviously, there are risks associated with settlement as well. I've already mentioned one of those. So there will be an additional cost to the council. That obviously impacts the council's overall budget. So I need to be very clear on that, and that's made clear in the full report. And as I mentioned, we will have to publish that change of contract, and that leads to a potential risk as well. That's it, Chair. Open to questions.
Any questions for Kirsty on that, Henry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just so the committee knows, Martin and myself were invited to a conference on this before it went to executive. I attended that conference and have heard most of the confidential stuff. I wish just to make one point. I cannot believe that a private company who is supposed to be as good economically as Suez needs a 40% rise in the fees to cover their performance when they were fully briefed before they went into this. We have no option, I get that, but I cannot believe, having been operating on the railways for over 25 years and done contracts bigger than this, that the amount of homework they failed to do is enormous. And that's just a comment. I understand we had no options.
Taken as a comment. Okay. Edric.
I find it rather incredulous too that we're being asked to give extra money to a company who I know from experience through having people who know friends who work there who have unlimited fuel cars and company cars. I don't think they're a well-run company.
Kirsty can come back on that.
Yeah, I can completely understand members' frustration and disappointment in where we are and the additional costs to Suez. I think the main focus that we have taken and tried to remember, however we may feel about things, is finding the best value for Somerset residents, and this is the best value option, regardless of how we may feel about the company. This provides best value and continuity of service.
Yes, I think that's a point well made. Mike Rigby, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks very much for the presentation. And can I thank Mike as well and Dixie for giving me a private briefing on some of the detail of this about a month ago. That was very helpful. I agreed that I think we have little option in the circumstances, but that's because we aren't ready with an alternative. So my suggestion from this committee would be that in order to make sure that we don't have a recurrence of this, because having succeeded once, what's to stop Suez coming back and saying, actually, do you know what, guys, we need a little bit more? To guard against that, I think we need to be ready to take this contract back in-house, as other councils have done. We can't do that in the current circumstances because there isn't enough time. They could walk away and leave us in quite some difficulty, but I think we need to be ready, certainly by the end of this contract, to have a properly worked up in-house bid. The sooner we do that, the better our position in terms of not being in a similar position again with Suez. My only other comment would be that it's disappointing that the contract didn't have a higher penalty for walking away. It would have apparently be in Suez's interests to walk away because the penalty for doing so is insufficient. I don't know if we can change that in the existing contract negotiations to make it more difficult for them, but if not, certainly in our procurement dealings in future across the board, we ought to make sure that contractors are penalised more heavily in the event that they walk away. Those are my two comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Kirsty.
Went off.
Sorry. Sorry if you couldn't hear online.
Thank you. Edric Hobbs and then Marcus. Oh, I'm sorry, Dixie. No, but we take it in turns.
Yes, I think kind of Kirsty's answered those questions, Mike, but I agree. We need to take this opportunity to be thinking what we'll do, be ready for 2030. There's just the one point that I wanted to make was that this paper did come to scrutiny before executive to the last meeting, but there wasn't time because of the, we had the academic talking on, I just thought someone might say, why has this come after the exec? It didn't, but we ran out of time. Just want to make that clear.
Yeah, good point. Thank you. Edric.
Can I just ask, in the dim distant past, didn't all the councils loan money to purchase vehicles to the waste partnerships? Is that involved with this, and have the payments been kept up on those? I'm correct. I seem to remember we all loaned money to when the waste partnership was set up. Is there? Can I just have clarity if in this financial crisis, if everything's up to date on that? I thought it was correct. Thank you, Henry.
Anybody answer that one? Mike, thanks.
So in terms of the capital assets within the contract, Somerset Council owns those assets. Effectively, how that works is basically that was initially part of the capital bid, and there are contract discounts that basically take account of us providing Suez with those assets. So effectively, they're kind of excluded from this agreement.
Did I have another hand? I think Marcus, did you put your hand up earlier? I think you did, and then Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. It was actually following on what people said about having a plan B, etc. And one of the issues is that this will come around quite quickly. And actually, how long would it take us to formulate a plan B in case, we're suddenly facing a similar situation? And if it was next year, we know we wouldn't have a plan B. Bearing in mind all the reorganisation issues we're having, and people talk about 2030. Well, that's that'll soon be upon us. But what happens if something catastrophic happens in 2027? And we appreciate that, when this contract was being sorted out originally, there wasn't exactly probably a big queue of companies wanting to do the job.
Yeah, thank you. So I think work has to start almost straight away to start looking at alternative options. I think it is very unlikely that Suez would walk away, never say never, because of the things we put in place with the liability cap and other penalties that have been picked up in there to make that much tougher. They understand we can't agree to pay more money and then they walk away. So hence the stronger penalties within the contract now to disincentivise that. Basically, it's several years. If we go down the route of having a local authority trading company, that is several years to successfully mobilise. There is a lot of work involved. So as I say, work really needs to start straight away. One of the issues we face, and not only us, it's a national issue, it's quite a small marketplace. We've ended up in, really, given the size of Somerset, there's only really a couple of providers that are in a position to tender for it, and Suez has been one of those. So that makes it quite a tough marketplace around the re-tendering as well. I think there's options you could look at, and this will all need to be appraised, but you could look at offering those as smaller contracts, so split the county in half. That may bring more providers to that if that's the option members choose. But I think, realistically, the work needs to begin now, because actually 6 years, 5.5 years is not very long. So that work needs to start now and move forward, and for members to obviously make a decision.
Thank you, Dave Mansell.
Okay, thanks. Right, things said have sort of prompted me to think further on a few points, but right, let's see. I did have a look at the confidential part of the paper when it went to executive, and probably what I was looking a bit more closely at was the options, how different ways of different providers could operate, and given the circumstances, I see why the decision's taken as it is. personally, and as some have sort of indicated, I was also lean towards preferring to have a local authority company or DLO, that sort of option to provide it. I think there are advantages to doing that. There are some risks with it too, which have to, important they're understood. There's some ways the economics of the situation, which I think the report shows, point you in different directions, not always for good reasons, but they're there. But so I hope that there is serious look at a local authority controlled option for when the contract comes out again. I will say, looking at this contract, I'm not close to it, but there's aspects of it which I've thought are good. Very impressed when I've been around the transfer depot and what's done there and other things. So the contract delivery, although there's always room for improvement, there are aspects certainly that have been good about what's happened, and it did start at absolutely the worst possible time. I do recall, we were rolling out a new survey just as we were being overrun by COVID, but contractually didn't have much option but to do it. So it was the timing absolutely couldn't have been worse for that start. Nevertheless, we got through all of that. I think the other questions I would put, and this is an attractive contract. I mean, it's a big contract, and that's something worth bearing in mind. But to the market, perhaps for the biggest players, Somerset is a big area now. It's a big contract to provide, so it's one worth tendering for and putting effort in, and I believe that that happens. Something that might also, depending on what options we're doing, though, is the bidders who can bid and how that's done can exclude bidders, and it might exclude some good bidders. At one time, the curbside collection market was actually dominated by the community sector, and the big players who did the refuse collection weren't involved in recycling. We're going back decades now, but the community sector side has largely gone, but there are still some there, and some bigger ones who are there. And I believe there was one interested last time. I heard, though, that they couldn't meet the pre-qualification requirements that were set. And I think that's a reason for looking at them closely, because it may exclude some good bids from coming in, including ones with, not just not the profit motivation, but a wider one. So that's important to look at. But and the final point I did think I would make is, and some of the questions have already sort of gone in this direction, but making sure the lessons are learned, and we've had some indication that we have done. I don't think I'm straying into confidentiality, but I understand one area of dispute was over how many households are actually served, and I know that's been a question going back previously, which has been answered, but it arose again this time. Will we make sure that that never gets opened up again, that it's well answered? So have we had a close look at all the reasons for the dispute and made sure that they're closed off so they won't happen again?
Yep, Kirsty.
Thanks, Chair. So, yeah, thank you for the points. There's a number of items in there. I think it's just to reassure members that there will be a full options appraisal, so of the different things to the LATCO, which brings benefits and also brings some risks as well that we don't have at the moment. The same with the DLO option. So we will go through that and the retendering. If the retendering process is chosen, then obviously I think your comment about pre-qualification requirements will be reviewed as part of that. Lessons absolutely have been learnt though. So the households, we've done work together to review that list. So our household database is from our council tax records. I don't think that'll be a surprise to members. We've gone through and done that work, and we've also built into the requirements of the settlement of the agreement that Suez can't revisit back to that. So they can't make another, we settle this and then they decide in a month's time, actually, we'd quite like to revisit households and the number again. So that has been kind of closed down as part of those negotiations to try and protect the council as much as possible.
Thank you, Kirsty. Are there any more comments or questions? You can come back, yes, by all means.
Thank you, and that's fine. I'm just worried whether that door is still open. I have to say the answer you just gave me on council tax, and I was never close to, what was a dispute here, but I know it's come up in the past, and there may be the possibility of households which somehow or other are not on the council tax list. I've no idea, or of properties receiving a service which are commercial, which shouldn't do. I don't know, but I just have a feeling there may be more needed to make sure that's closed off. I don't know. You know it much better than me, but I'm just wondering. Your answer maybe didn't quite fully go to the place I thought it might have done on that.
No, if I may come back, Chair. So it's a combination of those things, as in some is commercial properties that have been presenting waste, some are properties that aren't on the council tax base, some of them are properties that are believed to be on the base that aren't. So there's been a lot of work done. They may be properties that aren't built yet, for example, that may think there's collections and they're not. So we have done a lot of work together, so both teams, reviewing that list and getting to a point where we are both satisfied we are at the appropriate number. Hopefully that reassures you that it is closed down.
Thank you. Yes, Edric Hobbs.
Just quickly on that note, I've had an issue of trying to help people locally where two pubs where the flats are registered for domestic waste have found it difficult to get supplied with bins in bags because the collective we, said, no, you're a pub. Yeah, the downstairs is a pub with its privately paid for commercial bins. We pay council tax on a flat. Can we have bins for our own waste? So I'd like to make sure that in relation to pubs with flats above, that this is addressed rather than having to go for an elected member to prove that they pay council tax on a flat.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, obviously, any problems that do rumble on like that, let Mike or I know, and we'll pick those up with the team and try and nip them in the bud.
Okay, got Marcus, and I think that we can draw
Say,
conclusion.
I've been paying council tax for 6 years and had my bins emptied once, but the rest just goes in biffa and makes recycling a lot easier.
Statement.
I think, yeah, absolutely. Come back to us if there is an issue. Then let us know and we'll pick it up.
Just so I think to summarise, the committee noted the report accepted the need to increase the payments to Suez as the best possible option and recommended looking at the option of bringing waste services back in-house for 2030. Anybody disagree with that? I'm sure the other more detailed suggestions will be minuted. Thank you both very much. We now go on to agenda item 9, the Climate and Place Budget Outturn Report, and Mickey Green has got the good fortune of presenting this.
Yeah, thanks. I'll keep it brief. So budget monitoring goes through corporate and resources scrutiny, but as has been noted at numerous points through this meeting, it's a large, diverse and complex set of services we've got within Climate and Place. So the chair and vice chair asked that we bring, and obviously because the financial emergency is such a significant driver for where we are, the chair and vice chair asked us to bring that part of the report through to this committee, just so we could be fully transparent and take questions on it. And by way of context, we're still working to get a kind of joined up performance report that we bring through to this committee as well. I'm not going to go through kind of line by line because I think the report sets out kind of quite clearly where we are in terms of that forecast favourable variance, and in particular highlights the movement since month 10. I guess probably two contextual remarks without trying to get into the whole of the kind of corporate finance side of things. There's obviously been lots of controls that have been put in. We've been trying to reduce the amount of spend. And I'd remind you that we're only just, I mean, this is looking at the first year of this council as a unitary authority. So I think, you know, the fact that there were, you know, you'll see it referred to in different parts, we're still trying to reconcile income, or that's happened quite late, or sorting out some budget lines, I think is a natural product of where we are in terms of settling down as a new authority. Where's the chair disappeared to? Oh, Vice Chair. So, yeah. Yeah. Well, I was just going to say I wasn't going to go through it line by line, so happy to take any questions, Vice Chair.
I think we'll let the members ask the questions line by line if they want to, if that's all right. Who wants to ask any questions on this? Go on, Marcus.
I thought it was going to be quiet today as well. I wasn't in the mood when I turned up. Thank you, Mickey. Couple of questions, one, because I mean, I remember trying to merge West Somerset's and Taunton Dean's economic strategy, and how that took quite a while and cost quite a bit of money and had all sorts of words in it that I still don't understand. But it says here that it's going to go to executive in January 25, which I thought, are we being a bit hopeful from experience on that? I know we've probably got 4 economic strategies that we try and merge together, but then how do we deal with that, bearing in mind there's 5 regions or 4 regions or 5 regions or 6 if you include the national park, and therefore I'm looking at the board, and are we happy that they're representative of, you know, for instance, the Somerset Chamber? What influence does that have in? It might be central, and this is not a dig at the Somerset Chamber, but it might have a bigger, stronger base in one area of the county than it does, say, in Porlock or Wincanton. So how are we going to deal with that? And how's obviously going to link into, because I can see what's going to happen with the economic development. It's going to talk about connectivity, and it's going to talk about digital connectivity, which probably then goes into the next report that we've got, that we've already touched upon earlier on, which was the Connecting Devon and Somerset. So how does it talk to digital connectivity, but also getting back to an earlier agenda item to physical connectivity, because you can have all the economic development in the world and talk about AI and talk about big data and all those things that I still don't understand, but you still can't get a bus to your job. So I'd have to bring that up. And then on one final point is, we can have an economic development strategy that says we're going to do this, and we're going to create this and this, etc. Or an economic strategy, as it's being called. But how does that then link into the fact that we've got a local plan that might not necessarily, might be years away, and actually you've got an economic strategy saying you want to do something, and then you've got the NIMBYs saying, well, not here, you're not. And how do we deal with that when it comes to things like employment space, etc.?
Yeah, Mickey.
I think you've jumped ahead to the kind of items for information and the development of the economic strategy, but happy to respond to the points. I think the first one was about
the budget.
But I'm happy to answer it now, if that helps.
Apologies, Chair, but unfortunately I made the mistake of not seeing over the page and seeing there's an item 10. So when you were doing the last item, I was so busy reading this report to make sure I'd read it. So anyway.
That's fine. I think Mickey's prepared to answer some of your issues anyway.
Can I come in a minute, please,
Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
of course, yeah.
Part of your problem, Marcus, is that this item in our papers has no heading, no lead officer, no portfolio holder at the top of it, and it's down as an appendix. And frankly, it's not good enough.
Well, I'll come back to Mickey, who has been given the onerous task of presenting it, which I don't think was intended originally, was it?
No, it wasn't.
No, not quite.
And as I explained in my introductory remarks, the formal scrutiny of the budget goes through corporate resources, but we included the appendix here to give members the opportunity to talk about it. To go back to Councillor Kravitz's questions, it is an aggressive timetable in terms of the economic development strategy, but I think that represents both the importance of that to the present and the future of Somerset. And actually, and you're right in the terms of the aspects it touches on. So it's part of that joined up suite of strategies. So the climate change, ecological emergency, our economic strategy, and there's considerable joint work. So the local plan is under development, as has been referenced by councillors earlier. So the two teams are working really closely to make sure that the economic needs assessment that informs the local plan is done part and parcel of kind of the work on the economic strategy. So the timing is deliberate to make sure all of those strategies work in tandem. Clearly, we want to reflect the agenda of a new national government, but it is an aggressive timetable, and yes, it does have all those connections. But that's almost the driver for trying to do it now rather than leaving it till later.
Yeah, I'm going to bring in Councillor Liz Lashon online. You're looking pensive, Liz. I think this is. I should have invited you in perhaps earlier.
No, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to make the point that it had been the intention of Finance to bring forward a quite significant number of appendices on budget monitoring each month. But it is a really good point that each appendix doesn't have enough at the top to separately identify it when it's not with the covering paper. So I will pass that on to Finance and ask that each appendix can stand on its own, so that when it comes to a scrutiny meeting like yours today, it makes sense. Thank you.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. I do have Mike Rigby. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I might have got this wrong, so correct me if I have. I apologise. My understanding was that in order to help balance the budget, that we took some money from the CDS programme that would otherwise...
Mike, I'm sorry, is your microphone on?
I'll sit closer, how's that? Oh. My understanding is that in order to help balance the budget last year, that we took some money that would have been spent on the CDS programme. I think it was as a result of a really good outcome in terms of the take-up, and some of the money had to be given back by the commercial operators. But rather than spend that on the CDS programme, we used it to help balance the overall budget. And I don't expect an answer to this today, but I wonder if we could have a report to this committee in the future on what the opportunity cost of that was. What have our communities not got that they would have got as a result of that, the diversion of those funds?
Mickey.
Yeah, happy to answer at a high level, but as Councillor Rigby suggests, it's quite a complex area, so we'll do a written response. And a similar question was raised at exec, which Paul and his team are working on, so we'll amalgamate those two if that's okay. The kind of high level answer is it was gain share, so it was money that wasn't expected, so it hasn't disadvantaged anybody in terms of the delivery programme that was anticipated. It was kind of extra money. There are two things that then come into play. One is the kind of council's constitution in terms of when that money comes back, it kind of almost it gets cleaned, making it sound like money laundering. It gets cleaned and we have to make a fresh decision on allocating it. So that's one kind of factor. The other is the national rules effectively have changed as the item 2 and the items for information connecting Devon and Somerset makes clear. Effectively, the local authority role and the ability and the legal cover we have to subsidise, to intervene in that market, to fill that gap between what the market's prepared to do and what we know we all need in terms of broadband, that's been removed because they're now delivering that at national level. So there are national legal reasons why we can't just roll that into further delivery, but that will be covered properly in a note. But I hope that gives a kind of bit of a layman's summary.
Thank you. Okay. Any other points or questions? Yes. I think I beg your pardon. I did have Harry down prior to you, Dave. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
It's my fault.
I would like to make the point. I do sit on the C&R committee, and this is the budget centre that has made the most savings throughout last year and has left us in a position where, as you know, we're now 1.6 million in the black on our budget, not 30 million in the negative. And I do think that we need to acknowledge that in this committee, as they have the officers and the lead members have tried extremely hard to find savings to actually lead to this outcome.
Thank you. Good point. Dave, you have the floor.
Thanks very much. I thought I'd caught your eye, but I clearly hadn't. Right, so, and fair point Henry's just made. My my question is sort of connected to that, though. I noticed the planning policy is underspent, and I wonder if we can be told a little bit more than that. In a way, I feel a little bit disappointed that it's underspent, not least because this committee has been asking for some things that we think planning policy should be doing, which we don't believe are there, and then to see that there's some money and we keep being told the resources aren't there, and then we now see that money's been released from the budget. So what has been missed out? How has there been an underspend in planning policy?
Paul isn't here, so I might come back to the committee with a written response if that's all right, and see how we can reflect that in your request for an update generally on the local plan. With the activity that was supposed to fund still needs to happen. We still need to produce a local plan. Obviously, it was quite a last minute change in that estimate, so that removes that kind of flexibility to have those conversations about, okay, if we're not spending on that, could we spend it on this? So it's regrettable in that sense, but yeah, I will come back with a fuller response if that's okay.
Councillor Rigby.
Thank you, Chair. Just to expand on the point that Councillor Mansell there has made, you may recall that when we had a meeting of this committee a few months ago in Bridgewater, we had a discussion about, I'm assuming that Councillor Mansell is talking at least in part about a policy on renewable energy and energy efficiency measures in conservation areas and listed buildings, and we'd asked whether or not we could have some supplementary planning document produced on that. We were told that it would cost £1 million, which you'll recall I was slightly surprised about, given that the whole local plan covering everything for the whole county was only going to cost £5 million. So I took it upon myself to have a chat with the head of planning policy at Bath and North East Somerset, a council that's done something very similar to what we wanted to do here. And their policy, which is slightly more expansive than the one that we were requesting, just to let you know, was £100,000, roughly speaking. So some way south of the £1 million. So I think we probably need to have another conversation about that discrepancy at some point. Thank you.
I think that should be noted. Thank you very much. Any reply? No. Any other questions or comments? Okay. I'm happy to conclude that. I'm not concluding the meeting yet. Thank you. I'm so glad to have Henry Hophouse as my vice chair. Nothing gets past him. So drawing that one to a conclusion, I think notes have been made as to what answers. Are you happy with that, Mickey? Would like to be brought back to this committee. We've got item 10, which is for information only, but I do notice that there are things like connecting Devon and Somerset in those papers there. So therefore, if anybody wants to come back to you know the line to go back to the committee clerk. Thank you. And before we close the meeting, we have this issue of finalising the task and finish group for the water issue. Now, Steve Ashton has been online throughout the morning, I think. He's certainly put his thrown his hat in the ring. Can I ask, is there any reason why other members of council can't be on this task and finish group? We don't know of it. No. You'd be happy. So we've got Steve Ashton, Mike Rigby, Simon Coles, Marcus Kravitz. Norman wanted to be on it. Alan will be on it. Okay. Henry, I think you threw your hat in the ring before. I personally, I think as chair, would prefer not to be on it to retain any sense of objectivity. But I was prepared to stand if we were a bit short numbered. I don't think we are. Is that fair? What is there a number, a given number for task and finish group? I don't think so. So we got all those. Thank you very much for your for volunteering, Alan. Well, I mean, is this on this matter? You'd like to bring this up under any other business? Let me conclude then. That matter is resolved. Thank you, Alan.
Chairman, solar farms. Quite a thing on the topics at the moment in place. How do we stand as Somerset County Council? The government is bringing in a thing that's going to fast roll this sort of thing. And am I preempting things because they're going to put us in awkward position, I think, in a minute, because there's quite a lot solar farms earmarked one place and the other. And how does it leave us as a climate in place committee?
I'll have a go at answering that. In as much as I think it's something that we can't discuss now. I'll bring Dixie, you come in before me.
Well, I just want to kind of do a bit of a reminder about the very hard work that a number of these committee members on the energy, climate and place kind of task and finish group did in producing a document which we did call a myth buster. We're not going to call it a myth buster because they're not all myths, if you know what I mean, but it's a kind of objective explanation so that members on planning committees can respond to some of the objections that they get from the public. So that document isn't quite ready to share with everyone yet, but it will be soon. I think that will help us all feel a bit better informed about the pros and cons in terms of what the new government is going to do about planning and renewable energy. I think it's a wait and see, isn't it, really? I would have thought. But it's a good point, because there will probably be changes to all approaches to planning coming down the line, I imagine.
Yeah, and I think as Edric will note as well, we had a very big one. And Rob, yes, sorry, you were there, but at Planning East, we had a very big one that came up then. And I don't think there was probably enough clear guidance. We had to use our discretion, which is not something any councillor really wants to do. Henry.
There is one subject which has been changed and will be coming through legislation, and that is the onshore wind farms. And part of the document that was written, the task and finish group actually says that we should remove that and we should be getting onshore wind built. So we may need to rewrite part of the document so that it meets what's already happened. Is that fair, Dave?
Dave?
Yes, I would say so. And I think the document Dixie mentioned will be particularly helpful. I can't resist mentioning something that has often been said, that it would be really helpful to have some sort of land use document so people understand what we do. And if people are concerned about land being taken, they might want to have a little look at golf courses and how much land we devote to golf courses at the moment, which I understand is, you know, much more than given to solar farms, but certain things in the media attract attention. But you know, how we use our land is an important factor, and I think we've raised this a few times, but there's always resistance on getting into it. But actually, you know, it's part of addressing these dilemmas and making sure we have got balance in these things. And I think that's when those of us who say have a land use document, that's what we've got in mind. You know, start identifying the balance for these things and trying to get it right. But and I think Henry's right to draw attention to the energy plan, and this is part of why we're really keen for the planning policy officers to come back to us with a report, because we think this is an agenda that should be advanced as quickly as we can. We do understand some of the difficulties, but if there are some areas where we can advance them, we'd be keen to do that. And you know, we need to hear from the officers and hopefully have some active engagement on this, because we're keen and we hope they're keen as well. It'd be good to see.
Thank you, Dave. Are you a golfer, Mickey?
I am not a golfer. I play once a year for the, how should we put it, more for the 19th hole than any of the others. And yeah, hear your points made again in terms of wanting that conversation on the local plan. And just to reassure you, in terms of that land use framework, it is something that we're reflecting in our lobbying plan for government, because as we've kind of discussed previously, we're raising for guidance from government on what they actually mean by it, and make sure we've actually got funding to do it. So it's not for us not caring about it, it's making sure we actually approach it in the right way. So it's not the committee's comments and your reminding of us is not gone unnoticed, is what I wanted to say.
Good question. That I think should conclude any other business. Thank you very much for coming. Not bad. We've been a lot longer than this in the past. See you next time.
Can I just remind people, as one of my little bugbears, can we all take our cups back to the kitchen and wash them up, please? I don't think it's a job for the officers to do. Thank you.